This is the Thrive Podcast with Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. And now, Pastor Fred Jeff Smith.
Hello, and welcome to the 30th edition of the Thrive Podcast with the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. I'm Fred Jeff Smith, pastor of Shiloh, and I'm very happy that you took the time to either listen or view this version of Thrive. And I am delighted today to have as my guest the co-minister of music for the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, Mr. Laurence Hebert. Mr. Hebert is an extremely accomplished musician. He is a professor at both Louisiana State University and Southern University. As I said, he's co-minister of music here at Shiloh. And if I'm not mistaken, he has his own music ensembles that he works with as well. Mr. Hebert, thank you for taking the time to share with us today. I always like to start by asking you to just tell our audience a little bit about who Laurence Hebert is.
All right. Laurence Hebert, all you want to know about me. I was born in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I spent half my life in Lake Charles. The rest of the half, I'm learning, I spent here, right here in Baton Rouge. But yeah, had a very musical childhood. I grew up in a musical family. My sister played the piano. And one day, after she started practicing and got off the piano, I started practicing, and I wasn't in piano lessons yet. So my mom was like, "You know what? You're getting some lessons." So it's been a really cool journey thus far, because I can honestly say that I've had music in my life, like in every facet, from childhood to adulthood. So music, in a sense, brought me to Baton Rouge. I guess it was January my senior year. And you know, most seniors, by that time, you figured out where you're going. Everything is set. It's like if you're going to college and stuff. I didn't have all that figured out just yet. So one of my mentors had some connections with LSU. She knew a few people. She said, you practice, like you have things ready. We're gonna get you an audition. And I laughed at her at the time, because I wasn't thinking about LSU. At the very least, I was thinking of just staying home, maybe going to either the local university there, or just staying doing what I was doing. But on the off chance, I took the opportunity, drove up here to Baton Rouge, and perform my pieces for who would later be my teacher. And lo and behold, they liked what they heard. They liked the vibe that I presented. And yeah, just like that, I was going to Baton Rouge. And from there, it's just been one kind of journey after another. Just all been musically related. Shiloh was a result of my direct connectivity to LSU. I met Everett Parker at LSU.
Right.
He was the gospel choir teacher there.
Right.
So, and he tried for many, many, many years. Because after he heard me play, he said, "Do you have a church here?" And at the time, I was still going back and forth playing my home church in Lake Charles, Sacred Heart and Immaculate Heart, and a little country church out here. But I never really considered a larger type church, just like one church. So he tried for about 3-4 years, and finally he convinced me to just go on ahead and give it a shot. And I dotted these doors and spoke then with your father. Right. And one of the first things he told me, he's like, "Can you take direction?" And I was like, "Well, of course." I'm a Catholic guy. Of course, I can take direction. Yeah. And the second thing that he said, just because Shiloh's a progressive church, he said, "Can you take direction under a woman?" And I say, "Well, I mean, I grew up with, I lived with my mom all my life. Right. My mom says go, so it's no thing." So I fit right in, and I guess you can attest, I'm still here.
Yes, yes.
So music has really connected like every facet of my life, and I've really been blessed to be able to have said that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Music has been an important part of your life. I'm sure that as a musician, you are asked to play all different types of music. And we know you here at Shiloh for your gift with regard to church music, gospel music, even classical gospel music. But I'm sure that as a musician, you have your own personal taste, your own personal favorites. What is the favorite genre of music for Laurence Hebert?
In my childhood, I definitely like Mariah Carey. I don't know why. It was something about the way she sang.
Beautiful voice.
She could do things that other people weren't doing, or very few. Nowadays, it kind of depends, because I like Drake. Everybody likes Drake. I like gospel music. Tasha Cobb, Benita Jones has some really good stuff. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear one of those songs on Sunday.
Okay.
Stand and Proclaim. But really, I say that to say I like all types of music. And I tell my choir members all the time, bring me your song suggestions. I can't promise you we'll always do them, but just hearing different people's musical tastes, you never know what you like until you actually press play and you listen to it.
Right.
So I've developed a deeper love for gospel music than I probably would have if I hadn't done the church route. So yeah, gospel is up there now, and contemporary gospel. I love traditional gospel, like your Mississippi Mass Choir, but there are some good artists, and I don't think they get enough props today.
Gospel music has become more complex over the years than it once was, as it has become more commercial and more commercially successful from the standpoint of economics. It has become far more complex. There's more of a I hope I'm saying this correctly, more of a pop sound to contemporary gospel music than there once was. When I was a boy, the musician here at the church, Mrs. Elizabeth Milligan, who played the organ here, she used to say to me, "Baby, if you can play a C chord, an F chord, and a G chord, then you can play anything in the church." I'm not sure that that's true anymore. In fact, I'm quite sure that that's not true. So talk about the evolution of gospel music from your standpoint as a musician. And how do you teach that to choirs? Because as the music has evolved, what you have to teach to choirs has evolved as well, I'm sure.
The short answer of it is yes, you can sometimes. It just depends on the genre of music. At rehearsal a couple of days ago, we were running through actually that same song I just told you about, Stand and Proclaim. The verse is 4 chords. I think it's 4 chords. You learn those 4 chords, bing, 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 bang. You have over half the song. Now, with today's music, there is more of there's not just necessarily a chorus and a verse, a chorus and a verse. There's a verse, a chorus, a bridge, a vamp, sometimes a second vamp, and maybe even a comeback around with a key change. Because I guess musicians and artists today realize there's a lot that you have to compete with, and they want to keep your interest as well as be able to spiritually inspire you. That being said, I've noticed that even with today's music, and you said that today's gospel music seems to mimic contemporary popular music.
Right.
That's always been the case, though, because if you go back to the 50s and the 60s, and you think about a lot of those hymns and a lot of the songs that the choirs were singing, it sounded like rock music, or they sounded like what James Brown would be singing, like the chord structure. You got to listen to the music.
Okay.
If you go back 100 or 200 years, the music that was being played in the Catholic Church was Bach. You had Bach. You had Handel. These they weren't necessarily just church musicians. They were court musicians. So they played at the pleasure of the king. So a lot of things that you were hearing that the church was mimicking from was stuff that they were doing for the people in the castles. For the
so
king.
it may sound classical to us 150 years later, but it was actually popular music at the time that it was done.
Yes, and I think at one point someone made some noise about it. Like, you know what? We don't want our music to sound like this, and that's where a lot of deviation started to arise from with Catholic music in general in the church. Because you know, there's certain things that they'll allow in the Catholic Church, certain things that they won't allow, and this goes back thousands and thousands of years. So, but yeah, music went through that.
So is that still true now? Because I understand, I've never been there because we're always in church here, but I understand that the gospel choir at St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church here locally in Baton Rouge sings all of the same contemporary gospel music that you might hear at this church or at a Kojic church or at a Protestant church. So is that a universal thing that you're just saying, that there's certain music that you can't sing in the Catholic Church, or what? Well,
the Roman Catholic Church has gone through a lot of transformation, especially in the last 30 or 40 years. Today's Pope is a lot more progressive, so there still are very strict policies in place as to what you can sing and what you can't sing. It's all, and it's just like what we would have here, things that are based off of our doctrine, things that we believe. Right. Yes. Now, the Catholic Church goes a step further, because there are certain spots where songs are supposed to go. For instance, you have during the communion, you have to do a song that's dealing with communion, the bread, the body and the blood of Jesus. Right. Some churches allow you to have like a communion meditational hymn after that is done, to where if you want to do an extra song or something that wasn't necessarily related to that. But each song is supposed to be designated for a specific purpose within the service. So yes, and it's always the same. Like the first song is usually a praise song. The second major song is maybe the offertory song. So that's something dealing with the preparing of the bread and the body, or offering yourself. Yeah. And then the communion hymn, something dealing with the bread, and they stick to this. But there are songs in today's contemporary world that you can find that deal with these topics. Now you have to look a little deeper.
So the structure is the same, but you're allowed as a music staff to have some choice in the selections of the music?
You do.
Am I hearing you correctly?
You do.
Okay.
Now, because my sister is a minister of music back at my home church.
Yes, sir.
And I bless her heart. She's had to go through all the different changes, because Catholic Church that I grew up going to, a lot of the mass parts have changed. Like things are a little different now. Where we used to say, "The Lord be with you," and the congregation would respond, "and also with you." Right. We don't do that anymore. The preacher will say, "The Lord be with you," and then the congregation will say, "and with your spirit." And I guess it's more. I think it was more in the sense of being more doctrinally sound, like the peace be with you and peace be with your spirit, as opposed to the other way. So it was small changes, but then there were larger changes, because the Catholic Church, once again, they were trying to organize the information, wanted to get it right. So the Catholic Church that I grew up with, it's evolved over time, just like any other church evolves over time, and it's a wonderful thing. Just because, even though I don't attend Catholic Mass every week or so, it kind of became like a family thing for me, because that's what my family grew up as, and it's really cool to see that in the 21st century, the Catholic Church is still doing things to keep itself relevant, because that's the thing overall. if you believe in God and you have a nurturing spirit and you get that group of people together, you can do a lot. And it's not so much Catholic versus Baptist versus non-denominational anymore. It's about what can the people of God do to change things, or to uplift someone, or to set a right from a wrong. It's a cool thing. Like it's a really cool
it's interesting
thing.
what you're describing, because as I said before we started taping, my wife and I had the opportunity on yesterday evening to attend the ecumenical prayer service for the new bishop for the Baton Rouge diocese, Bishop Duca, and the service, and you were clear to say to me that this wasn't a full mass, but the service was so welcoming to all different types of faiths, not merely differences within Christian faith, but all different kinds of faiths. We were there as a part of an ecumenical gathering of clergy, and along with us there were Jews, there were Greek Orthodox, there were Muslims. So you had a broad cross section of the faith community that exists within Baton Rouge, and I didn't feel like a spectator as a Baptist. I felt like I was someone who was invited to participate, and I didn't recognize the songs, but I was amazed at the people around me, including my wife, who was able to sing all the songs with the choir that sang. But then within the service itself, there was an opportunity for people of different cultures to display their culture. Songs were done in Vietnamese, songs were done in Spanish, songs were done in French and in German and in Latin. So you had this cross-section of things all within this 1 hour worship experience, and I thought that it was a beautiful expression on the part of the diocese that we are open and we are welcoming to people of all different kinds of faith. And to me, that speaks to what you're talking about the evolution that you have seen within the Roman Catholic Church. I only have a surface view of Roman Catholicism based upon the limited amount of study that we did about the Catholic Church when I was in seminary. But in that you are a Catholic, I imagine you bring a different perspective to that, and that kind of open and affirming welcome, is that now the staple of the Roman Catholic experience?
I'd like to think so. Like I say, my sister is the minister of music at Immaculate Heart in Lake Charles.
Right.
And we'll talk from time to time, because she'll present me with some of the issues that she has going on. You know, every church goes through their own issues. Like, she might have an issue with a choir member, and I'll laugh because I say, you know what, I went through the same issue with a couple of choir members of mine a couple of weeks ago. This is what I did. This is what I did. So we exchange ideas. We exchange songs. We exchange. We talk to each other about God. She's explained to me a lot of the differences with the Catholic Church and with why they do some of the things that they do. Because growing up, I would do everything, but I didn't necessarily know why we were doing everything. So now that we're older, and now that she has that position, she tells me, she's like, oh, this is why that we do everything the way that we do it. And when I learned the organization of everything, I really learned that the religions weren't so different. to be Catholic. You just got a certain set of rules that you follow. Within those rules, like there's so much that you can do.
Yeah.
I think there was a Sunday we sang some of the same songs. Like if you would have gone to Shiloh's Baptist service, we had a good old time.
Right.
You went 2 hours to Lake Charles, and you were at a Catholic service, and the same song. As a matter of fact, I think that week was Total Praise. I think it was maybe 4th of July week for them. But it wound up being like a wonderful service. She told me how well received it was from the congregation, and that's a great song. Like Richard Smallwood,
oh yeah,
you can't do any better than that.
It is. Yeah.
Like I said, the music isn't all that different. It's how it's presented, and when it's presented in the right context, then yes, it makes the Catholic service, makes the Baptist service, it makes a non-denominational service more welcoming, more inviting. It makes it more just home feeling, like you feel comfortable there. A lot of churches nowadays get stuck in the in the facade that this is what we were like 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and they fight the ability to be able to progress, and it's a sad thing to see, because the church will age, and in order for the church to remain youthful, it has to change, it has to grow. That's everything in life, and I'm thankful that Shiloh is not one of those churches, because when I got here 10, 15 years ago, I can honestly say we weren't doing this. That wasn't a thing.
Right.
Our services were different. And it wasn't that it was bad nor good. It's
very
just
liturgical.
It was different.
It's the way that we grew up.
I used to joke that this was the easiest transition, because everybody would ask me. I think it was a few years before a lot of people at Shiloh knew that I was Catholic.
Right.
I was directing. We had just finished doing, I forget what song. We just did it last week again, though. The Ricky Dillard song, the na 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 na, joy, I come more abundantly. And after that service, the first time we did that song, people came up to me and said, "Oh, you directed that choir? You did that? I can tell you Baptist." And I said, "Well, actually, no, I'm Catholic." And they thought I was lying. I literally had to pull up some pictures and like, "Look, it's me in my first communion, yay!"
Yeah.
But so we joke about it now. They tell me I'm. What's the word they use? They say I'm Catholic. Yeah. I say Catholic light. They say, you're a Catholic, or you.
Well, you bring up something interesting about Shiloh, and the fact that I grew up in this church gives me a perspective on how worship has changed over the years. When I was a boy, Shiloh had a very liturgical. Number one, we only had one worship. There wasn't a two worship experience. It was just one worship at 11 o'clock. And it was a very liturgical worship experience. There's a lot of responsive readings. The call to worship was responsive. Then there was a separate scriptural responsive reading that took place. The songs were uniform. We sang Holy, Holy, Holy every Sunday morning. There was no worship experience without Holy, Holy, Holy. There was no worship experience without the Gloria Patri. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, to the Holy Spirit.
Y'all were Catholic.
Well, it was a part of the tradition of this church to have, and some people thought of it as high church. My father was trying to achieve a worship experience that he considered to be balanced, where you had elements of a high church experience that would appeal to one group of people, and yet elements of a more homey type of church that would appeal to a different. His idea was trying to appeal to the greatest swath of people possible through the worship experience. and to see how that worship experience has changed over time. And I used to tell people all the time, my father was far more adaptable to change than I was. I took the worship experience that I grew up with, and I took it with me when I first pastored in New Orleans. I put that worship experience in place there. When I first went to Greater Mount Carmel, where I served for 21 years, I put that worship experience in place. And ultimately, I recognized, just as you're saying, as times changed, that worship experience was no longer relevant to it. It meant something to me, but it didn't mean anything to those who were there. And so we have had to make adjustments, and those adjustments are still being made. And now at Shiloh, 8 o'clock is different from 11 o'clock. And I appreciate the difference, and I see the difference in who attends. And how they respond to the worship experience. One of the other things that I've had to grudgingly acknowledge, God, this hurts to have to say this. Most people who come to church on Sunday don't come to hear the preacher. They come for the music. And if the music is attractive enough to get them in, then you have the opportunity to preach to them. But by and large, people don't come to church to hear the sermon. They come to church to hear the music. And you know that because when certain choirs are singing, they come. And when other choirs are singing, they don't come. And that's just a fact that you have to deal with. So how do you respond to that? You're no longer just a musician. You're a music leader. You're co-minister of music. How do you make that fit in your music planning? You don't just sit down and look at a list of songs. Okay, we'll sing that one and that one, that one. You're making some kind of a spirit-led, logical selection process. Explain that to us. Help us understand how you come to that.
Well, I do think you sell your sermon short. You deliver some great
He had to say that, folks. I just want you to. He had to say that.
Well, no, I say that to say because I've had friends attend the church service before, and the things that they will remark, they'll say that the choir was good because they expect the choir to be good. You expect the singing to be good, but not all the time you get a good word because some preachers these days they get up there and. I'm trying to put this in an elegant way. There's you get certain little cliched things that after a while there's like it works if there's some substance in the message, but if your whole sermon is just very cliched, like the Lord will make a way, right. But you don't give a scriptural reference to show that the Lord made a way, or people recognize when you're trying to educate them and trying to inspire them. And like a lot of my friends that have attended the service said they really enjoyed the sermon because, for one, they felt like they learned something, and then they felt like they were inspired to like whatever their issues were, or it made them feel good. So along the same lines, when I'm looking at music, I try to put myself in that same position because yes. It should be a given that the music should sound good. Like not everybody's gonna like everything, but yes, if you take that out the way, so everything that we pick is gonna sound Lord gonna make it, He gonna work it out. From there, so like for altar call, in most cases, I always try to find a song that's dealing with prayer, and maybe that's going back to my Catholic roots days. And if not a song dealing with prayer, then like a hymn. Something that, that get you in the mood to pray. Right. It's not always going to be a fast song. It's not always going to be but it's not designed to be. It's designed to get you in the frame of mind to be able to pray. So the song before you do your sermon, most times I try to make it a song about Jesus because. At the end of the day, your sermon is always going to come back around to you need to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior in your life. So as long as I do that, I'm always right. Now the first song that we do as kind of it can be a little bit anything. You can take a couple of chances on that song. If all else fails, find your praise song. Praise song works. And that's generally how I approach each and every week. Now,
how do you think Shiloh is dealing with praise music? The praise and worship period, the praise team. Shiloh has two praise teams. For those who are not familiar with the Shiloh Order of Worship, we have two different praise teams. We have an adult praise team that sings at 8 o'clock leading into the worship experience, and we have a young adult praise team at 11 o'clock that opens the worship experience. Not quite the same as leading in. At 8 o'clock, it's a lead-in to the beginning of worship. At 11 o'clock, it's the first part of the worship experience. I have to tell you, I think that Shiloh is slowly evolving to a place where they are more accepting of praise and worship. I've been here now 5.5, almost 6 years. I think that the acceptance of praise and worship is better now than it was 6 years ago. What's your thought on that?
Oh, I agree. I definitely agree. When I first got here, I think we had 3 or 4 praise teams. That being said, there was no specific part in the service for the praise team. It was like they were an afterthought. So the congregation treated it as such. They didn't know they were supposed to treat it any other way, like this is optional. Over the years, especially with you coming on board, we've made the adjustment to make them seem like less of an option and more inclusive, more part of the ministry. And I think just doing that from week to week, the people started to see, hey, this is actually a part of the service. We should be paying attention. And then after that, then hey, we kind of enjoy some of this. I love the young adult praise team. I think they're hands down probably one of the best praise teams that you could assemble in a Baptist church.
I agree.
Believe it or not, my heart goes for the adult praise teams because I saw their struggle. I was speaking with T. Tabor over this past weekend, and she was saying how back in 1996, they were still doing the nursing home service that we do every fourth Sunday. And I'm 34 years old.
Right.
In 1996, I was in the 6th grade. And this praise team that I'm now in charge of has been keeping an assignment for as long as I've almost been on this earth.
Right.
So, and to see their transition from like doing what they do and people not paying attention to them, not really giving them the time of day, to seeing the response now, that they get a response from the congregation. When we ask them to stand, they stand. We ask them to sing, they sing. And each week, they get a little more confident, and I see the growth for them as a ministry. Do they always have the best voice? No, not all the time. And we sing at 7:50 in the morning, so it's hard to sing at 7:50 in the morning. But I guarantee you, I feel better when I leave their rehearsal than probably any of the other rehearsals that I do. It's the combination of that praying spirit. And there are a lot of cancer survivors in the adult praise team too. So you just feel good after we pray. Like when we pray to start the session, Sister Jerry, she'll give that good prayer, like that Heavenly Father. Like, and before you know it, we're all hugging each other, and like it doesn't even feel like a rehearsal. It feels like, hey, we fellowship. And same thing when we're about to end the rehearsal. A lot of times I have to rush them out because we have another rehearsal coming. Like, look, y'all, you can't be praying for 10 minutes. Like, they going in. Just the spirit is there. So they are really near and dear to my heart, just because I've seen their transition and their growth. And I wish more ministries could be like them. In that sense.
In addition to your worship experience responsibilities, as you just mentioned, you do a lot for Shiloh away from Shiloh. Music is a part of what we do when we go to the nursing homes. Music is what we do when we do prison ministry. Music is what we do when we have special evening activities. Music is what we do for the Early Learning Center that we operate. Music is what we do for Vacation Bible School and other aspects. With all that you do musically for Shiloh, where do you have the time to teach at LSU and at Southern and lead the gospel chorus for LSU and have your own ensemble? How do you make the time to do all of those? You must have an incredibly disciplined life to be able to do all of that.
I rest in the summertime. That's a great question. I guess as far as just managing it, I always had a lot going on. Even in high school, I wasn't an athlete. I tried to be. I ran track and cross country, and did choir in school, and then was in like the National Honor Society. But that was just how my family was. My mom encouraged us, and my dad really encouraged to get involved in a lot of things. And so I learned how to multitask, I guess, really early on. My biggest, the biggest thing that I had to overcome was my timeliness. I know it might not seem like all that much now, but I was always late to everything. Like that was my biggest thing.
I kind of recall that about 6 years ago. Yeah,
but yes,
but I don't have that problem anymore. I have to be honest. I don't have that problem at all anymore.
That was something that I had to kind of fix about myself, because with all those balls being juggled in the air, the only thing that was really keeping me from just having success with everything was the fact that, well, you only got 5 minutes to prepare for this that's going on right here, so how much can you really do? Things had to, on Saturday now, my Saturday evenings are ruined, because if I don't have an evening gig, pretty much by 10:30, 11 o'clock, I'm like, oh man, if I'm not getting in bed, I'm scared I'm not gonna wake up.
Sure.
And if I'm not gonna wake up, it just all balloons. It just balloons up.
Sure.
So I kind of scared myself into, you need to start being on time. But then I saw the benefits of being able to kind of prepare, just kind of, and it made for a better experience. I feel like I enjoy things a little bit better if I'm on time to really be there. And then somebody told me, I can't remember who it is, but the saying was wise and it stuck with me. The things that you value, you're there on time for. Think about anything that you like. And we talked a little earlier. You like the Cowboys.
Yes, very much so.
You gonna be in front of the TV, ready to go as soon as they come on.
Yeah.
You won't catch them in an hour, but if you can make it, you're gonna make it.
Yes.
I treat it. I like the Saints. So when the Saints play,
I won't hold it against you. 95% of my congregation are Saints fans. So.
You know what? I'll tell you a story about when the Saints and the Cowboys played the year my Saints went to the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And won. I threw a little party at my apartment back then, and the Saints were undefeated.
I remember that game.
You probably know how it's going.
Yeah. Tell me your version of it. I remember that game because we weren't having a great year.
No, you weren't.
But we had a great night.
So, the party was going great. Yeah. Then all of a sudden the game started.
Yeah.
By the end of that game,
Yeah.
I was not a happy camper. And everybody that knows me thinks of me as the nicest guy ever. They say I never not smile. After that game, I kicked everybody out. I said, y'all gotta go.
It's funny you bring that up. I was not the pastor of the church at that time, but I was coming here. My father had suffered a stroke, and I was helping him out with a couple of things. And Sister Effie Carter, who's a member of this church, had a Sunday school fellowship party at her house. because that game was sometime around Christmas. It was close to Christmas time, as I recall. And she invited me to come to the house, and I was surrounded by Saints fans. And they were all watching the game, and they were having a ball. Reb, your team is going to get whipped tonight. By the third quarter, they left me alone, and I was watching. I said, what happened to all y'all? I was watching the game on that big screen TV all by myself. We had a good night. Had a bad season, but we had a good night. So I remember that game very, very well.
Oh, Rev, you would have had to go. Peace be with you. You got to go.
Peace be with you on the other side of my door. I get it. I get it. Music staff, musicians. I'm not really music. Musicians. Yeah. There is a stereotypical cliched tension that exists with pastors and musicians. I don't know if you're familiar with that, coming from a Catholic background, but it has existed for a long time in Baptist and other Protestant circles. It stems from the fact, my take on it, it stems from the fact that there is a paucity of trained musicians that are available to churches. Baton Rouge has nothing else. We got churches. We got an abundance of churches. We've got 8 o'clock churches. We've got 11 o'clock churches. We've got noontime churches. We've got churches that meet at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We've got churches. What we don't have are a strong supply of qualified, trained, educated musicians to fill all of these churches. Consequently, there is a situation that always exists where we have need for qualified music staff, and yet we don't always have the resources available, or when you have the resources and the human resources available, when you have qualified people, we're not always able to compensate them the way that they need to be compensated. As a musician, as a leading musician, as a musician who leads other musicians within this church and within the other things that you do, what's your perspective on music staff and how that staff situation is supposed to work within a church setting?
Great question again. Well, as far as our staff is concerned, what I was looking for were musicians, because our church, we like to do different genres of music. We like to do classical music, where there are times when we do contemporary gospel or traditional gospel. I prefer to have musicians that can do things in all these different genres. I think the biggest issue that we have with musicians is that most musicians can do one thing. And that's great for certain churches, certain environments. But larger churches, to me personally, in order to reach a larger amount of people, you have to do things that cater to a larger audience. And sometimes that means you have to do more than one genre. So to have a musician that can, per se, read music, but that can also pick up things by ear, it's a valuable musician to have. Even in a college setting, to use both LSU and Southern as examples. In LSU, I find that you have a lot of students. They're really book smart as far as they can read music. You can put it in front of them. They got it. The challenge there is to get them to take it off the page and make the music come alive, like to add the intricacies, the little small things that make you remember the piece. Now on Southern side, a lot of the students, they can give you that without ever having seen the sheet of music. The challenge there is to get them to be able to make that correlation and be able to put it on the page or be able to interpret it that way when it's on the page. And it's two completely different ways of achieving the same goal. Because by the end of the 4 years, both students will know how to read music, will know how to kind of hear it, and then be able to play it back, and then be able to analyze it, interpret it, and do what they need with it. So, but it's about finding those musicians and finding the musicians that have the desire. If the need is, yes, we do need you to want to read music. We need you to have the desire to want to learn how to read music. Because if that's the case, then yes, I can teach you. I can make you do what you need to do. But that's really the challenge, to find those musicians that can read music, or find the musicians that can play by ear. And be able to help them to figure out that other part, or whatever the deficiency is, and for them to be willing enough to want to do that. I like to chart things out, and for musicians that play by ear, sometimes that can be hard because I'll call out the actual chord name. And they won't necessarily know what that is. So that's a communication gap, but that's a simple fix. Because if you're a bass player, and I tell you, you're gonna get a quick music lesson, and it's a number system. This is how easy it is. Let's say we're in the key of C, and everything works like the alphabet, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we started with C, and we did C, D, E, F, G, and then we ran out of letters, so we started back over, A, B.
Right.
You can attach numbers to all of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you have a good ear and you know how all of that sounds, we'll even do the scale for you. Shout out to my 104 ear training class. This is Do, and you got Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So it's a number system. It's a solfege system. Any system works. So let's say you're playing with your bass player, and your bass player knows that little number system. Just from calling out this, bass player knows, dum. If I call out this, he goes, dum, 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 dum. And I can communicate with my bass player now.
And he can
just
make
from
that
my
transition.
head.
Okay. Let's further the music lesson, because now you've got me curious. How do you handle sharps and flats in that situation?
That's a great question. Let's see, what do we do for sharp? Sometimes I'll say like a flat 3, because it's an easy thing to say. Sometimes I might even point down. It just depends. Or like a what would I say? I would say maybe like a lower, like a flat 5. If ever I want you to lower something, I'll say flat 5 or like flat 5. The question I thought you was going to ask, what happens when you got to do 6 and 7, because you only got 5 fingers.
Right. No, but I've heard you I've sat in your rehearsals, and I've heard you on Sunday morning, and I've heard you call out numbers. Now you're telling me what those numbers mean, and I find that interesting. But I don't see how those numbers relate to sharps and flats, and so I'm curious how you handle that.
Well, you just say a flat 3. So like if you let's say the scale is da 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 do re mi fa sol 1 2 3 4 5. When I say flat the third, you're gonna make that third change the sound a little bit. So it's gonna sound do re, and we say me da da da. So if I say flat 3, he'll know to play da as opposed to da.
So they really have to pay attention to you as the director.
If they don't know the song.
And even if they do.
Sometimes even if they do, because that's the cool part about gospel music, because it does allow for that spontaneousness, that in the spirit, if you will, feeling. Like if it sounds really nice, you might see that. That means keep going, and in that. Yes, you can make a different song, or you can make a song form within a vamp right there. I like to organize things. So sometimes you might see me, after I do this, you see me do this.
Right.
Or sometimes you see me like do, those are all communicative they're designed for the people that's supposed to do what they're supposed to do,
right.
for them to know what they're supposed to do with minimal like talking. Because when all the music is going, you can't hear it. You can't hear somebody say stop or go again, but you can see this.
Right.
You can see this. You can see this. You can see this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how all those hand symbols and stuff were born. If you ever want to know,
okay,
it's not us being fancy and we moving around. I will say sometimes, like if I'm enjoying the song, yes, and they say you should be as happy on Sunday as you are on Saturday. I'm as happy on Sunday as I am on Saturday, whether I'm directing or I'm singing. But a lot of times I am given constructive communications while I'm up there, and if you're not paying attention, you don't know what it is.
Right.
So.
Right. That's very interesting.
Got a music lesson.
I did, and I need one. You know, I've never had any formal music training. I used to try to pick at the organ by ear, but because again, Mrs. Elizabeth Milligan, who was the first organist here at this church, and she was still alive when I was a child, she used to say, "Babe, all you need is one finger on one key, one finger on the other key, and one foot on the pedal, and you playing music." She had me thinking I was doing. And so I called myself actually playing. Finger up here, finger down here, and foot on the pedal. Man, I was going to town with that. But it is such an integral part of the worship experience. It can help to elevate a worship. Music can, and when it's not right, it can make a worship experience flat.
Oh yeah.
And quite frankly, makes the work that much harder for me. So I have a full appreciation for what it is that you bring, and that Shiloh. I have said this in worship. I don't mind saying this on this podcast for anybody who's listening. I think that Shiloh has one of the most talented music staffs you can find anywhere, not just anywhere in Baton Rouge, anywhere in the world. You all are super talented musicians. We have several musicians here who have their own bands and do extremely well, quite successful out in the public with their own bands, and yet they come together and work cooperatively here at Shiloh, and I think it's a tremendous asset to what we're able to do. I'm about to wrap up. I always ask the guests here, especially when I'm dealing with younger people, and to me, you're a younger person. Do you think that Baton Rouge is a place that you would want to live the rest of your life, or is this just a season, a protracted season of your life, and do you have plans that might take you away from Baton Rouge? And don't give me the answer, well, you never know what God's gonna do. No, I'm you know, what is Laurence's?
Put me on the spot.
Well, I ask that because I have a love for this city. I'm born and raised here. I spent a few years down in New Orleans pastoring a church, but I never wanted to live anywhere else but Baton Rouge. And I see a potential in Baton Rouge that has yet to be realized. And to me, one of the hindrances of that potential is the fact that some of our best and brightest leave here and go to the Houstons, the Dallases, the Austins, the Memphises, the Atlantas. And when I'm dealing with talented people, I ask this question of Terrence all the time, the person who's producing this podcast. Terrence has talent that can take him anywhere he wants to go. And I feel exactly the same way about you. You have talent that can take you anywhere you want to go. I'm asking you, is Baton Rouge a place that you can see yourself growing old in?
Yes and no. Yes, in the long term. Because I feel like even Louisiana in general is a great place to retire, to settle down, to raise a family. I don't know, like when I say long term, I mean like 20, 30 years.
Right.
Like, but within like the next 10 or 15 years, I would like the ability to be able to travel, because I think that's the one thing that I haven't really done yet as extensively as as I should be doing. I just spoke with a friend of mine who's moving back. He's trying to get his doctorate at LSU, but he spent some time teaching. He spent some time kind of touring around. He's an opera singer, and he's been all over the world. And to be able to do that, to be able to experience just music from all over the world. I feel like I do owe that to myself, being a musician, to test my limits. That being said, I've been very fortunate to be here in Baton Rouge, and a lot of opportunities, a lot of experiences that I've had here, that I've shared with people here. I never thought that I would get that here, which is why I'm still here. So just a yes and no question, because I do like staying here, but there is that small desire for me to want to be able to travel and just to do what I do, but to be able to do it in a sense that allows me to go all over the world. So yes and no.
That's a fair answer. I just think that Baton Rouge has tremendous potential. Capital city of the state.
I agree.
2 outstanding universities, a burgeoning community college system. You have industry here. You have business here. You have the arts here, of a particular genre, predominantly, but it's expanding all the time. And I think that the quality of life here, what we have to offer, is tremendous. I also recognize that we have serious problems. We have social justice irregularities. We have bigotries and biases and discrimination. But I think that you find those things anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm always clamoring. 2 weeks ago, I had a young man sitting where you're sitting, who teaches in Japan. And he was home for a while, and we had the opportunity to exchange ideas. And I asked him, "You have any plans on moving back to Baton Rouge?" No. Baton Rouge is always home. I always love coming home, but no, I have no plans to come back and live in Baton Rouge. And that's always a little bit disheartening to me, because I just think that Baton Rouge needs to do more to retain its talent and not see that talent go off in different directions. So we're going to enjoy you while you're here until you come in and say, "Rev, I'm moving on now." But for the time that you're here, we're grateful that you've chosen to share your talent with us, and I'm grateful that you took the time to share with us in this podcast today. Wasn't that hard? Now was it?
Oh no, it's fun.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for viewing. We'll be back again next time.
Goodbye.